The news is a classic example of conditioning. At the beginning of the news broadcast, we have the repetitive graphics moving back and forth, and the dramatic jingle reinforcing the trance state. The news broadcaster looks right into the camera and into the eyes of the viewer, which has a very deep impact in terms of driving information in. It makes the information transfer very personal, and it's another well-known hypnotic technique. If you think about it, whenever you hear news broadcasters speak, you realize that regardless of their ethnic background, whether they're black, white, Hispanic, or Asian, they all have a similar way of speaking. Newscasters all sound a certain way. They all have the same rhythmic speaking style associated with the spreading of true factual information, a speech pattern noticeably similar to that of a hypnotist. And people have been conditioned to accept this format as the way true factual information is presented. The newsreader is established as a respectable authority figure, which encourages the audience's acceptance of the information. The news programming begins with the statement concerning the news headlines. Here's what the news is going to be. Then we get the story itself. This is the news. And finally, at the end of the program, we get a reminder of the main headlines, just to drive it home. And that was today's news. So essentially, you're hearing the same story 3 times in the space of 30 minutes. The repetition of the information over and over again is what builds the conditioned response, so that whenever we're presented with information again, we'll accept it automatically without thinking about it. The famous radio broadcast of Orson Welles' rendition of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds is an interesting example in this context, because the adaptation was made in order to present the story as a news broadcast. There was an anchor person, there were journalists in the field reporting on new developments, there were outside experts being brought in to comment on what was happening. The combined effect being that people actually thought Martians were invading New Jersey, and it caused a panic that took almost 48 hours to subside, even after it was revealed to be a stunt. But a similar event happened in 1949 in Ecuador. There was a presentation of War of the Worlds, done as a news broadcast. Only this time, when the public found out it was a fake, they burned the radio station to the ground. We could learn a few things from those people. We could do with being a little more proactive in standing up for our own sovereignty on a number of levels, not least of which is our mindscape. Freedom of mind is the first freedom from which all other freedoms are derived. And if we don't have that, then we're in a lot of trouble. This little 2-minute broadcast will have you looking at the news in a whole new way.
Before long, a standard news report visual language established itself, one that's immediately recognisable to anyone. Me has this report. It starts here, with a lacklustre establishing shot of a significant location. Next, a walkie-talkie preamble from the auteur, pacing steadily towards the lens, punctuating every other sentence with a hand gesture and ignoring all the pricks milling around him like he's gliding through the fucking Matrix, before coming to a halt and posing a question. What comes next? Often something like this, a filler shot designed to give your eyes something to look at while my voice babbles on about facts. Sometimes it'll slow down to a halt, turn monochrome, and some of those facts will appear one by one on the screen. This is followed by the obligatory shots of overweight people with their faces subtly framed out, after which the report is padded out with a selection of lazy and pointless vox pops.
Usually get some inane chatter from people.
I think they do have too much. I think what we want to hear is actually what's happening and not what other people think of it.
I hate these sound bites. I don't want some punter's opinion usually. No.
Another bit of dull visual abstraction to plug another gap now before the report segues gracefully into a bit of human interest courtesy of some dowdy man opening letters in a kitchen and explaining how he's been affected by the issue.
When I'm watching the news, I don't really, there's a person talking to me, telling me what's going on, and I don't really listen to what they're saying. It's just news. It's just news.
He, unfortunately, was boring, so to wake you up, this is an animated chart, this is a silhouette representing the average family, and this is a lighthouse keeper being beheaded by a laser beam. As we near the end of the report, illustrative shots of pedestrians and signs and a pipe at a window, and then the final summary, ending on a whimsical shot of something nearby, accompanied by a wry sign-off. If you're lucky, a bit of wordplay fit for a king, or in other words, a regent's treat. Charlie Brooker, Newswipe, London.
The mind control issue is not a new one. It's ancient. What's different about the times we live in today is the technology that allows for simultaneous hypnotic programming and mind control on a global scale, shaping the thinking and behavior of large numbers of people. The use of subliminal technology first came to public attention in the 50s, with the publication of Vance Packard's book, The Hidden Persuaders, in which it was revealed that the American industries were researching subliminal technology in order to influence people to buy their products. At the same time, an experiment was being conducted in a film theatre in New Jersey, in which a message was flashed on the cinema screen for 1/30th of a second every 5 seconds. Drink Coke, eat popcorn. And sales increased dramatically during the duration of the film. Certain B-grade horror movies were also experimenting with subliminals, flashing words like blood at a certain frequency, or using barely audible sounds of an angry hornet's nest to elicit an emotional response. And of course, there was an immediate public outcry against this, and rightly so. The people recognized that this was an instance of invasion of the privacy and sanctity of one's mind, the influencing of one's mind without conscious awareness or consent to buy goods and services. Of course, Congress got involved, and there was discussion about passing laws, but after a while, because the populace are so easily distracted, the commotion died down. Even if legislation had been passed regarding subliminals, enforcement would have been almost impossible. Now, the very nature of subliminals is that they're undetectable, well below the threshold of conscious awareness. The message is presented so quickly or so faintly that we're not consciously aware of having seen or heard anything. Someone would have to inspect every frame of film or every second of sound tape, and that's just not practical. So, nothing really happened. And despite the public upset, most people are under the impression that we've been protected from subliminals ever since. Though in 1998, the December-January issue of Civilization magazine, the official publication of the Library of Congress, contained an article declaring that the use of subliminals is part and parcel of our everyday life. If you want to get a sense of where they're at with regards to reading your mind, or deciphering what it is that you want or need, just look into fMRI scanners and a couple of chaps called Marcel Just and Tom Mitchell of Carnegie Mellon University. You might also want to look into the studies of Professor John Dylan Haynes at the Burnside Center in Berlin. He's doing some very interesting stuff. So interesting, in fact, that he's been approached by government agents. But even the fMRI scanners seem insignificant, considering it's been proven to be much easier to induce desired brain states in an individual using magnetic fields or microelectric currents than to scan the brain and try to decipher the signal using some computer program. If there is technology available that's really capable of extracting information from someone's mind, then why are the military still resorting to torture in Abu Ghraib or Guantanamo? Perhaps waterboarding is just more fun, eh? Bloody mind-reading killjoys.